Hi and welcome to our new YouTube tutorial. In this video we're going to be creating the calendar with HTML, CSS and JavaScript from scratch. It's going to be a kind of little project compared to our previous projects, but I hope it will be interesting and you will enjoy it. So as I said, the project is going to be created based on HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So I expect that you already have some basic understanding of those three core technologies. Okay, let's go ahead and describe the project. So we have here a full screen dark background, and in the center of the page we see the calendar. It shows us the current month with the current date. Down below we have the weekdays followed by the entire month. You can see that the current day of the month is highlighted. Also we have here two arrows. If we click them, then we will navigate to the next and previous months. So you can check out any of the dates in the future or in the past. Alright, so that's what we are going to create. I have created a new folder on the desktop called calendar. Let's go ahead and open it in VS Code. I'm going to create the starter files for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Let's call them index.html, then style.css and script.js. Then open index.html file and create the basic HTML document. I'm going to use Emmet. Let's place here the exclamation mark and hit enter or tab. So here we go. Okay, let's go ahead and change the title. I'm going to insert here calendar. Then I'm going to link the CSS and JavaScript files to the HTML. Let's open link tag and specify the path of the file. As for the JavaScript, I'm going to open script tag right above the closing body tag, and then we need to indicate path of the file in source attribute. Okay, finally I'm going to launch the project to the browser. For that I'm going to use one of the CSS packages called a live server. It allows us to run the project to the browser live and make the changes and updates without refreshing the page each time. So I recommend to download and install this package. Alright, lastly I'm going to place the editor and the browser side by side, like so, and get started. At first I'm going to create the HTML markup. We will use some static data, but finally we will create that data from JavaScript dynamically. Let's open div tag, which is going to be the container. Then we need another div for the calendar itself. So the calendar will consist of three main parts. We have a current month with that green background. Then we will have the weekdays and finally the days of the month. So let's open div tag. I'm going to assign to it class month. At first I'm going to insert here the left arrow. It should be represented by the font awesome icon. So we need to bring in the font awesome CDN. So let's go ahead and search for font awesome CDN.js. Go to the first link, then select CSS and grab the link from here. We need to open link tag in the head element and paste the link as the value of the href attribute. Okay, so let's open iElement with the following classes. We need FAS, FA, angle, left. Besides that, I'm going to assign to it another class for JavaScript. Let's call it previous. Next we need the div element, which will include the month name and also the date. Let's assign to it class date. Then I'm going to pass here h1 heading element with the content May. It will be followed by the paragraph where we will have weekday, Friday. Then it should be followed by the month May 29, and then we need year 2020. So again, right now those are the hard-coded dates, but we'll make them dynamic later on. Next we need to insert here another arrow. I mean the right arrow for the future months. So I'm going to open iElement with the classes FAS, FA, angle, right, and also we need here class next. Alright, so the first part of the calendar is ready. Let's move on to the next part. We have to create the weekdays, so let's open div tag, which is going to be the wrapper. Let's assign to it weekdays, and then insert here all 7 weekdays. I'm going to insert here div tag with the content Sunday, then duplicate it 6 times and change the weekdays. So we need Monday, Tuesday, then we'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and finally Saturday. Alright, so with the second part we are done. Let's move on and create the third part, in which we will have the days of the current month. Let's open div tag with the class days. So first of all, I'm going to insert here a couple of days from the previous month. Let's open div tag with the class prev date and pass here 26. Then duplicate this div element 4 times and change the dates. We need 27. Next we will have 28, then 29 and 30. Okay, next we need the dates from 1 through 31. I'm not going to write each date separately. So to make this process simple, I'm going to use emmet. We need div tag, then an asterisk and 31, and then we have to insert $sign inside of the curly braces. So here we go. We have the numbers from 1 through 31. Besides that, I'm going to insert here a couple of days from the next month. So let's create div elements with the class next date. Insert here 1, then duplicate it 5 times and change the numbers from 2 through 6. Okay, actually with the HTML markup we are done. Now we have to start to customize the calendar. First of all, let's create some reset and common styles. I'm going to select every element using an asterisk. Then let's get rid of default margin and padding from all the elements. I'm going to set both of them to 0. Besides that, I'm going to set box sizing to border box. Next, I'm going to define the font family. Throughout this project, we will use one of the Google fonts. So let's go to the Google Fonts website. Then search for Quicksand. I'm going to select those different styles. Then grab the link and paste it in the head element. Next, let's define font family for every element. I'm going to set it to Quicksand sans serif. Alright, so that's it about the reset and common styles. As you can see, they are applied to all the elements on the page. Throughout this project, I'm going to use rem as the measurement unit. Right now, 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels because the font size of the HTML element equals 16 pixels. I want to convert 1 rem into 10 pixels, and for that we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element. Let's make it 62.5%. So as you can see, the element became a little bit smaller. Okay, so now it's time to work on the container. I want to expand it to the entire page, so let's select it and define width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. As for the height, let's make it 100% of the viewport. Then I'm going to change the background color. Let's use here color 12121F. And also change the color of the text, make it light using color EEE. Okay, next I'm going to place the calendar in the center of the page, and for that let's use Flexbox. We need display flags. Then for horizontal centering, I'm going to use justify content center. As for the vertical centering, we need align items center. Alright, that's it about the container. Next, I'm going to customize the calendar. I'm in the div element that wraps the content of the calendar. First of all, I'm going to define width and height. Let's set width to 45 rem. As for the height, let's make it 52 rem. Also, I'm going to change the background color. Let's make it 2, 5 times, and then 7. It's going to be the dark color. And then let's set box shadow to 0.5 rem, 3 rem, and the RGBA value with the black color and with opacity 0.4. Alright, so with the calendar div element we are done. Let's move on and customize the individual parts of it. I'm going to start with the month. Let's select it, and at first define width, make it 100%. Then I'm going to set height to 12 rem and change the background color, make it 167E56. Okay, next I'm going to use flexbox in order to place the elements horizontally in a row and also to center them vertically. So let's use display flex. Then, in order to create some space between the items, let's use justify content space between. And also we need align items center. Alright, after that I'm going to create some space on the right and left sides inside of the element. For that, let's use padding and set it to 0 at the top and bottom and 2 rem on the left and right sides. Also, we need to align text in the center. And finally, use text shadow with the values 0.3 rem, 0.5 rem, and the RGBA value with black color and with the opacity 0.5. Alright, so next I'm going to style the individual elements of the month div element. Let's go ahead and start with the arrows. Select I element. Set its font size to 2.5 rem and also make cursor pointer. Next we have the H1 heading element, which shows us the current month. So let's go ahead and select this element. I'm going to change its font size. Let's make it 3 rem. Also, let's make the font slightly lighter. Set font weight to 400. Then transform text into uppercase. Next, I'm going to create the space between the letters. Let's make it 0.2 rem. And finally, create some space at the bottom using margin bottom with the value 1 rem. Okay, let's go ahead and lastly style the paragraph. The only thing that I'm going to do is to increase the font size. So let's select it and set the font size to 1.6 rem. Alright, so that's it about the first part of the calendar. Let's move on to the weekdays. I'm going to set width to 100%. Then increase height, make it 5 rem. And also let's create some space using padding. I'm going to set it to 0 at the top and bottom and 0.4 rem on the right and left sides. Okay, next I'm going to place the weekdays horizontally in a row and also to center them vertically. So we need display flex and align items center. Okay, so with the wrapper div element we are done. Next, let's customize the weekdays themselves. So I'm going to select div elements. At first, let's change the font size. I'm going to set it to 1.5 rem. Then let's make font slightly lighter using font weight 400. And create some space between the letters using letter spacing 0.1 rem. Alright, now I'm going to define the width of each div element. As you know, the width of the calendar is equal to 45 rem. we created a little padding inside of the weekdays div. It equals to 0.4 rem on both sides, I mean on the right and left sides. I want to make the width of each div element 1/7 of the entire width. So I'm going to use the calc function, and we need to divide 44.2 rem by 7. 44.2 rem is the difference between the width and the padding. Hopefully it makes sense to you. Okay, so next we need to center the content of each div element, and for that let's use flexbox. I'm going to set display to flex, and then we need justify content center and align item center. Finally, let's create a little shadow effect. Use text shadow with the values 0.3 rem, 0.5 rem, RGBA value with a black color, and with the opacity 0.5. Alright, so that's it about the weekdays. Let's move on and take care of the days of the month. First of all, let's select the wrapper div element, which has class days. Let's set width to 100%. Then I'm going to set display to flex, because I want to wrap the days. So let's use flex wrap with the value wrap. And finally, let's create some space. Using padding, let's make it 0.2 rem on all four sides. Okay, next I'm going to customize the day itself. So let's select div elements. First of all, let's set font size to 1.4 rem. Then use margin, make it 0.3 rem on all four sides. After that, let's define the width of each div element. I'm going to use the same technique that we used on weekdays. So I want to place 7 days on each line. Let's use again the calc function. We need to divide the width of the calendar by 7, but we have to exclude the margin and the padding. If we subtract to the width the margin and padding, we will get 40.4 rem. The margin on each side is equal to 0.3 rem. So the amount of margin is going to be 0.3 multiplied by 14. Because overall we will have 7 days, it equals to 4.2 rem, and then we have to add to that value 0.4 rem, the amount of the padding. So we need to divide 40.4 rem by 7. Then I'm going to set the height to 5 rem. Then I'm going to center the content, so let's set display property to flex and use justify content center and align items center. Also, I'm going to create little shadow effect. Let's use text shadow with the values 0, 0.3 rem, 0.5 rem, and RGBA with a black color and with the opacity 0.5. Alright, so the days are customized, and next I'm going to style the previous and next dates. The only thing that I'm going to do is to decrease the opacity of them. So let's go ahead and select both of them and set opacity to 0.5. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is to highlight the current day of the month. At first, let's go to the HTML file and assign to the current day class today. Then select it and change the background color. I'm going to make it 167E56. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to do is to create a little hover effect. Once we hover over the days, I'm going to change the background color. Also display the border and make the cursor pointer. I want to do that for all the days of the month except for the current one. So let's select div elements with hover. Then it should be followed by the not selector. It is the function, and we have to pass here div with the class today. Okay, let's make the background color 262626. Then define border with the values 0.2 rem, solid, and the color 777. and finally make the cursor pointer. Also, let's use transition just for the background color. We need here background color and the duration 0.2 seconds. Alright, with the CSS we are done, and now it's time to add some JavaScript to our calendar and make it work. Throughout this part we will be working with the date object quite frequently. We will use a couple of different methods to manipulate the date. First of all, I want to display the current month dynamically using JavaScript. Right now it is May. We specified it from the HTML file. At first I'm going to create the date object. So in order to do that, we have to use the date object constructor function. In general, the date object returns the current date and time. Also, it specifies the browser's time zone and returns this data as a full text string. Let's go ahead and create the date object. I'm going to create new variable date, which should be equal to new date constructor function. And then run it to the console. So if I inspect the page and check the console, we will get the current date and time followed by the browser's time zone. Okay, so as we said, the first thing that we are going to do is to display the current month using JavaScript. In order to get the current month, you need to use one of the date object's methods called getMonth. So let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it month. It should be equal to date.getMonth. Then run the month to the console. As you can see, we've got here a number value 4. Actually, this is the index number of the current month. Now it's May, which is the 5th month of the year, but because of that the months have 0 base index numbers. GetMonth method returned 4, which is the index number of the 5th month. Alright, so in order to display the current month on the page, we have to use the getMonth method, and we have to manipulate with those index numbers. First of all, I'm going to create a new array in which I will store all 12 months of the year. So let's create new variable, which is going to be an array, and then pass here month names. The first one is going to be January. Then I'm going to duplicate it 11 times, and then change names. We need February, March, April. Then we have May, June, July, August. The next one is going to be September. Then we have October, November, and December. So the array is created. As you know, the items in arrays have the 0 base index numbers. So here each month has the proper index numbers from 0 through 11. Now I'm going to select the H1 heading elements, which should display the current month. So let's select it using query selector method. We need to specify here the class name, date, and then the H1 tag. So the heading is selected, and now we need to change its content. In order to do that, I'm going to use one of the DOM properties called innerHTML. Now we have to use our array months and specify the index number. If I put here the index number manually, let's say 4, and then get rid of the content of the heading element from HTML, we will see again May on the page. If I change the index number and write 5, then we will get June. So in order to display the proper month, we have to use the getMonth method. We need date.getMonth. So as you can see, we have here again May, but now it is displayed dynamically using JavaScript. Alright, let's move on and display the date. At first I'm going to select the paragraph which displays the date. Let's select it using query selector method. Then In order to change the content of the element, we need inner HTML property. So now I'm going to use one of the methods called toDateString, which returns the current date in a readable format. So we need here date.toDateString. If I remove the content from HTML, then we will get the exact same result on the page. Alright, so with the first part of the calendar we are done. We have successfully displayed the month and the date dynamically with the help of JavaScript. Now it's time to move on and display the days. We won't touch the weekdays, they will be displayed from HTML because I think it's enough. In order to display the days, I'm going to use for loop. First of all, let's create a variable days. I'm going to use let keyword and let's make it an empty string. So I'm going to loop through the numbers from 1 through 31 and display them as the content of the days div element. Let's use for loop. We need to create here I variable, which is going to be the counter. Then we need condition. I should be less than or equal to 31. And then we need I++, I mean the increment operator. So as the content, I'm going to insert here days, followed by the plus equals operator. Actually, this operator does the exact same as the following expression. For example, x plus equals 10 means x equals x plus 10. So now we have to create the div element and pass the I variable as the content of it. Let's open backticks and insert here div tag. Its content is going to be the I variable. Finally, we have to change the content of the wrapper div element. I'm going to create a new variable. Let's call it monthDays. Then select days div element using query selector method. And then down below, change the content of this variable using inner HTML property. So we need monthDays.innerHTML, which should be equal to days. So as you can see, we have here the numbers from 1 through 31. If I go to the index.html file and remove the entire content from here, then nothing will change. We will get again numbers from 1 through 31. So from now, the content of the days div element is displayed from JavaScript. Actually, we have to do here a couple of things. We no longer see the previous and next days, and also the numbers do not match the weekdays. Besides that, here we define the number of the days in a month as 31, but as you know, some of the months have 30 days and some of them 31. So instead of using here just 31, we need to define the ending date for each month. Let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it last day. Next, let's create a date object and define the current year and month. So we need to use here getFullYear method. We need date.getFullYear followed by the date.getMonth method. So the first method will give us the current year. As for the second method, it will give us current month. As for the day, I'm going to set it to, let's say, 1. Now let's run this variable to the browser and see what we got. So as you can see, we have here the 1st of May 2020. Now let's change 1 into 0 and check the result. In this case, we've got here the 30th of April 2020. So when you specify the day as 0, then you get the last day of the previous month. In our case, we need to get the last day of the current month. Therefore, we just need to add 1 to the getMonth function. Now, as you can see, we have here the last day of the current month. So instead of using here the hard-coded number, we can simply insert last day. But right now we can't do that because the last day variable returns the whole date and time. In order to get the number of the day, we need to use getDate method. So now it returns just 31 instead of other data, and now we can change 31 into last day in for loop. So nothing is changed here, we have the same result. In order to prove that it works correctly, I'm going to set the current month to, let's say, June, where we have 30 days. To change the current month, we have to use one of the methods called setMonth. So we need date.setMonth with the value 5. So now we see here June, and the number of the days is 30. It means that everything works fine so far. Let's get rid of this line of code. So once we display the days of the month, now I'm going to take care of the days from the previous month. If we take a look at the finished project, you will see that we display a couple of days from the previous month. So in order to achieve that, first of all, we have to guess how many days we should display from the previous month. I'm going to use a little trick. Let's go ahead and change the current date, make it the first day of the month. So we need date.setDate, and we have to make it 1. After that, I'm going to use one of the methods called getDay. It returns the index numbers of the days of the week. Those index numbers are 0 based. For example, Sunday has the index number 0, Monday has 1, and so on. So let's run to the console, date.getDay. As you see, we've got here 5. So the first day of May should be Friday, because Friday has index number 5. It means that the first day of May should be placed underneath the Friday. So now we can easily get how many days should we display from the previous month. It's going to be 5. Alright, so we have to create another for loop. Let's insert here variable x, which is going to be the counter. Now we need to define the number of iterations. As we said, in this case we have to display 5 days from the previous month. So overall we will have 5 iterations, and on each iteration we will create a new div which will be the content of the days div element. So the initial value of the x counter is going to be the index of the first day of the month. Let's create a new variable where we will store the index number of the first of the month. Let's call the variable first day index. It should be equal to date.getDay. Then assign this variable to the x counter. So now we have to define the condition x should be greater than 0, and on each iteration x should decrease by 1. So we need x minus minus. So let me explain again. In this case, the index number of the first day of this month is 5 because it is Friday. So the initial value of the x variable is going to be 5. On each iteration it will decrease by 1 until it becomes 0. So overall we will have 5 iterations, and on each iteration we will create a new div element for the previous month dates. So we need here days plus equals. Then we need to open backticks and insert div tag with the class previous date, prev date. Then insert here $sign with curly braces. Okay, so now we have to define the content of the div element. First of all, let's define the last day of the previous month. I'm going to use the same technique that we used in the previous case. Let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it prev last day, previous last day. Then I'm going to grab this value from here. So in order to get the last day of the previous month, we just need to get rid of +1. Because it gives us the last day of the current month. So if I check to the console, previous last day, then we will get 30, which is the last day of April. Alright, so to create the content for each div element, we have to subtract x to the previous last day variable. So as you see, we've got days from the previous month, but that's not quite correct because we've got here 29 as the last day of the month. It should be 30, so we need simply plus 1 inside of here. So the problem is fixed. Alright, so with the previous days we're done. Let's move on and take care of the days of the next month. In the case of the next days, we need to define the index number of the last day of the current month. So let's create a new variable and call it last day index. Then grab this code because it gives us the last day of the current month. In this case, instead of the getDate method, we have to use getDay because it will return the index number. So let's run to the console, last day index. We've got 0, and it means that the last day is Sunday. And we have to display 6 days from the next month. So to define the number of the days of the next month, we have to subtract to 7, which is the number of the days in a week, the last day index, and also we need to subtract 1 because the weekdays index numbers are 0 based. So let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it next days, and it should be equal to 7 minus last day index minus 1. Next we need again a for loop. In this case I'm going to use j as the counter. It should be equal to 1 because each month starts with 1. Then the condition is going to be j is less than or equal to next days. And then we need j++. So on each iteration we have to create a new div element and pass them as the content of the days div element. We need days plus equals, then open backticks and pass here div tag with the class next date. As the content of the div tag, we have to insert variable j. Finally, let's change the content of month days. So here we go, we have here days from the next month. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to do is to highlight the current date. Right now it's no longer highlighted. In order to do that, we have to use an if statement. As the condition, we have to compare counter1 to the current date. Once they match, then we have to add to the div element class today. So we need I triple equals to new date dot get date. Besides that, we have to compare the month to the current month. So we need here logical and operator, and we have to insert date.getMonth triple equals to new date.getMonth. So if this condition is true, then I'm going to copy this line of code and add to the div element class today. As for this div element, it should be placed in the else statement. So as you see, the current date is highlighted. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to do is to make the arrows work. Once we click the left arrow, we should navigate to the previous month. As for the right arrow, we should move to the next month. I'm going to attach to both arrows event listeners with click events. So I'm going to select the left arrow with query selector method. Then attach to it event listener. where we have to specify the type of the event. It's going to be click. And also we need to pass here callback function. Let's duplicate it and change the class name. We need here next. Okay, so in order to move to the previous month, we need date.setMonth. Then we need to subtract 1 to current month. So we need date.getMonth -1. As for the next month, we need the same expression, but with +1. So if we click the arrows, then they won't work. The reason is that we need to render the calendar with a proper month on click. So we have to create the function where we pass the entire code. Then we have to call it once on the global scope. And also we need to call it when we click the arrows. So let's go ahead and create a function. I'm going to call it render calendar. Let's grab the entire code except for this line of code and paste it inside of the function. Then I'm going to call it on the global scope and also inside of those callback functions. Alright, so if I click the arrows, then they will work fine. As you see, we move to the previous and to the next month. Okay, so we are almost done. Actually, I see here that we have a little issue. The current date is not correct because, as you remember, we set the date to 1 and we need to change here date into new date. So now the problem is fixed and finally we are done. Alright, so I hope the project was interesting and useful and you learned some new stuff. If you like this video, then please thumbs up, comment below, share the video, subscribe to our channel and click the bell to get notified on coming tutorials. Okay, see you next time.